Let's examine the anatomy of a failed hardware launch. In February 2016, an Indian startup named Ringing Bells Private Limited introduced a new device, the Freedom 251. The specification sheet described a standard entry-level smartphone, a 1.3 GHz quad-core processor, 1 GB of RAM, and 8 GB of internal storage. But the global headline was the retail price. The company launched the device at exactly 251 rupees, roughly $3.74. This pricing model broke from the established realities of global electronics manufacturing. In 2016, no amount of scale could bring the cost of these specific components down to $4. To test the claim, the Telecom Ministry conducted an internal evaluation. They found the absolute minimum manufacturing cost for this hardware was 2,300 rupees. Selling a 2,300 rupee device for 251 rupees creates a structural deficit of 89% per unit sold. This deficit was insurmountable through traditional sales. To function, the business required a massive influx of pre-order cash months before a single device was ever manufactured. This impossible pricing triggered a formal inquiry led by India's telecom minister, Ravi Shankar Prasad. Investigators focused on the device's bill of materials, or BOM. The BOM is the hard cost of every physical component, setting the absolute floor for what a product must cost to produce. The Indian Cellular Association provided the context for these costs. As an industry regulatory body, they track the baseline price for regional hardware assembly. This bar chart shows the industry consensus. According to the ICA, a single functional smartphone could not sell for less than 3,500 rupees. The Telecom Ministry placed the floor lower, at 2,300 rupees. Against both benchmarks, the Freedom 251's retail price creates a massive gap of over 2,000 rupees per unit. Some analysts speculated that advertising revenue could bridge this gap, essentially using the hardware as a loss leader to sell digital ad space. However, hardware ad subsidization requires a vast pre-existing user base to attract advertisers. Ringing Bells was a new entity with no active users to monetize. The massive loss per unit served a specific purpose. It guaranteed the overwhelming volume of interest necessary to fuel the company's upcoming pre-order phase. While the numbers suggested a financial shell game, the physical evidence was found at the company's headquarters in Noida. During the initial launch event, executives handed out prototype units to the media for immediate testing. Reporters quickly identified the first major anomaly. These units were actually rebadged smartphones manufactured by a competitor called Adcom. To disguise the hardware, Ringing Bells had simply painted over the original Adcom brand logo with white correction fluid. The software icons on the screen were also discovered to be direct copies of Apple's iOS interface. Following these reports, government officials raided the Ringing Bells offices on February 20th. The primary finding of the raid was that the product lacked certification from the Bureau of Indian Standards. Without this certification, it is illegal to distribute electronics in the country. The physical hardware was a prop, used to justify the influx of capital from the public. That capital began to flow when online bookings opened between February 18th and 21st. Website traffic was so high that the reservation portal crashed. Before the window closed, Ringing Bells claimed to have secured 30,000 unit reservations. The internal ledger showed 30,000 units and a total collection of 1.75 lakh rupees. But their math was wrong. 30,000 units at 251 rupees should equal 75.3 lakh. The reported figures didn't match their own booking data. This reporting triggered a defensive move from a payment gateway facilitator, PayUbiz. PayUbiz flagged the anomalies and withheld all consumer payments. They refused to release any funds to Ringing Bells until the company could prove that physical devices were being dispatched. With the cash float frozen, the company promised refunds to its initial 30,000 users and switched to a cash-on-delivery model. By freezing these funds, the payment gateway effectively deactivated the mechanism that would have allowed the company to operate on consumer capital. Once the consumer capital was blocked, the operation faced immediate legal consequences. Member of Parliament Kirit Somaiya filed a formal complaint describing the company as a Ponzi scam. This led to a first information report filed under the Indian Penal Code for fraud and cheating. The company leadership saw a temporary delay in prosecution when the Allahabad High Court stayed the initial report, calling it premature for that stage of the investigation. But while the consumer fraud was stalled, the company still owed money to its business partners. the fraud moved up the supply chain. Their customer service provider, SciFuture, accused the company of non-payment, and a distributor named IM Enterprises alleged they were defrauded of 16 lakh rupees. Total losses across the B2B and consumer sectors were eventually estimated at 20 crore rupees, or roughly $3 million. The timeline concluded in February 2017 with the arrest of director Mohit Goyal. The Freedom 251 remains a case study in the physics of the electronics market. When retail prices detach from the cost of physical production, the hardware becomes a secondary tool for capital extraction.